Welcome to Season 2 of the Inspectations podcast, hosted by Justin Starbird, CEO of the Abley Group. In business, as in life, one of the most difficult tasks a leader must do is find a way to manage expectations. Create expectations that are too high, and you will be constantly looked at as a failure. Create expectations that are too low, and your leadership will be questioned at every turn. Being able to inspect what you expect helps keep great teams pulling in the same direction and allows for pivots in real time. The Inspectations podcast brings together business leaders from all industries to talk about best practices, innovation, leadership, and business development. You're listening to the Inspectations podcast. Here's your host, Justin Starbird.
Welcome back to the Inspectations podcast, powered by the Abley Group. My name is Justin Starbird, and today I get to welcome a longtime friend, but first-time guest, Jaime Carroll, principal of the Rockwood Advisement Group. Jaime, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me, Justin. It's good to see you, man.
Likewise. It's funny, over the last, couple of months, we've been reminiscing about how our careers have intertwined and deviated and come back together over the last almost 11 years. I think we met each other ago with the Edison Awards.
In a while, yeah, New York City. Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago.
It does. Goodness gracious. But here we are, about 20 miles apart in Maine, and getting ready for apparently a hurricane.
Got my fishing waders out front here just in case. We'll be good.
It looks like it's gonna miss us. We'll see those memes on Sunday that'll be like the trash can with the lid open and say we survived Lee 2023. So
I love it.
So man, we have talked a lot over the years. We got introduced because of innovation and new products, and you were working with a company that was backed by IBM Watson, doing AI stuff before AI was a thing. Machine learning and all of those things. Today, you're at Rockwood Advisement Group. You started that a little while ago. Tell me a little bit about what Rockwood does today.
Yeah, so it's very simply. It was intended to be very simple, and honestly, Rockwood was formed really unintentionally. When I left my last corporate gig, I had really planned to just take some time with my family and pursuing some of the things that I really love to do. But what I found was I started getting calls from companies I'd worked with in the past that were dealing with, I don't know, what a lot of former executives might consider to be relatively routine challenges. But when you're so close to things, you don't see the bigger sets of challenges, at least as clearly as you might if you were sort of an outside observer.
Right.
So it was sort of a unique opportunity to come in and really help some of these companies with really primarily corporate strategy development. Where are the biggest opportunities? Where are the biggest gaps? And to be able to do that from an unbiased viewpoint. When you don't really we're not living every day, and you have had an opportunity to kind of really step back and look at the bigger picture, you can bring an alternative perspective that might seem obvious to an outsider, but to someone who's living it every day can be really challenging to dissect what's urgent, what's important, where are the big missing gaps, where are the big missing opportunities. So, we start, it was just me at first, and I started really focusing on a general corporate development strategy. And sometimes this would take the form of channel strategy. How do we deal with distribution opportunities? How do we deal with new product introductions, new vertical expansion opportunities? Do we approach new product opportunities with a lot of firepower initially, or do we ease in? So there's a lot of like different options you can think through when you're looking to expand your business and scale. We also have done a lot of executive mentorship services. I mean, I had one interaction with a pretty well ingrained pharmaceutical development company, and the chair of the board just asked me to meet with their CEO once a week, and I barely said anything. He would just sort of like go through everything that was on his mind, and I would help him think through optionality. He called me a sports coach. We met once a week. It was great. And it was something that was, relatively low impact for me, but for him, it just helped him, I think, a little more broadly around where his opportunities were. And that company ended up exiting to a strategic partner for over a couple $100 million, which is a great outcome. That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
But they really think through how to position themselves to be attractive to a strategic partner like that. So that was a really, really great outcome.
Do you focus on one industry? Are you, heavily in one or another? I mean, I know a little bit about your background in, animal health, et cetera, but, where do you tend to sit in terms of folks or companies that you advise?
Yeah, we're pretty heavily indexed toward animal health. And I think that's because of where the network sits. But as when you have enough experience running organizations, building companies, restructuring strategic alliances, things of that nature, those skills are really transferable across industry. So I have had a couple engagements I have a partner company out in Denver that is not in animal health, and they service organizations from food services to logistics, all the way through to huge recruiting companies out of Europe. The challenges are often all the same.
Yep.
So are the opportunities, by the way. And a lot of times it really boils down to what's the strategy, and then how you're going to execute on the strategy, right? Yeah. So a lot of the same questions lead up to the answers to those big opportunities, and it's really around getting organizational alignment around the strategy and sticking to it. I wrote a little article on LinkedIn about stick to your strategy. And I find I've had a couple clients in the past that, they have what we might call shiny object syndrome. They're trying to grow. They're small. They see it. They have a great vision, but they move quickly toward what appear to be short-term opportunities, and they abandon what the real vision is long-term, right? And so you never really hit that scale of growth that your potential is. So I'm really trying to help companies think through what's the strategy, how will you achieve that strategy, how will you measure success, by the way, and those skills are really transferable across any industry.
Well, generally speaking, strategy is a long-term outcome, and unless you break it down into short-term, milestones, it is really difficult, to stay focused on it because, a lot of people, so you call it shiny object syndrome. I say that it's oftentimes, folks need to turn around and see what was built that day and see the bricks, being, stacked on top of each other and the house being built. And oftentimes when you're the, leader of the industry, you don't have that opportunity any longer. And the higher up on the executive chain you get, the less you see day-to-day results, and the harder it is to value or see what you've done. So it's a lot easier to go after some of those shorter term, things, because they can actually, see results. And again, it's not necessarily successful results. It doesn't always mean it's going to be more money. Oftentimes by deviating from your plan, you actually cost yourself more money. So, from that perspective, when you come in, how do you help them evaluate their existing strategy, or are you in there to, help set the strategy?
Well, great questions. It's a little bit of both sometimes. It depends on the stage of the company, right? So there have been organizations that have had a very clear vision and purpose and have been operating off a strategy, but they believe that they're leaving opportunity on the table. So I'll help them sort of think a little more broadly about where are the opportunity gaps, right? So it might be a strategy revision in that case. And there are other organizations that are simply they're just early stage, they're getting started, and they actually don't really know, do they go north, south, east, or west? And so, you bring up a really good point, Justin, about, pivoting toward the short-term wins. There's a way to do that and still stick to your long-term strategy. And some people call it horizon planning, but I think of it as, and by the way, we did this at LifeLearn. I got turned on to a guy named Patrick Lencioni. I think you've probably heard of him. He's written a ton of, he calls them business fables. So they're sort of easy reads, but there's a message in there. And one that really hit me hard was around organizational health and alignment. It's called The Advantage. And the thing that I got out of that we implemented at LifeLearn that allowed us to achieve those short-term wins, but still be moving toward a larger long-term strategy was a playbook method. And so what we did is we would get the teams together and we would go through, sometimes it would take a couple of days, but what's the one most important thing that we need to accomplish and in what time frame? And that's a really hard question to answer because there's a lot of things that are important.
Yep.
But his point, and something that I've been saying for 10 or 15 years now, is that if everything's important, then nothing's actually important, right?
Yep.
So you have to, what is it? Is it revenue growth? Is it, customer satisfaction ratings? Is it bottom line growth? It could be any number of things, right? Is it employee retention? I'd argue that a lot of companies don't pay enough attention to the importance of employee retention and development, right?
Well, I'd say it's not just that. I mean, a lot of companies don't pay attention to client retention.
Yeah, it's way cheaper to keep a client than to get a new one, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Same thing with getting an employee. But going back to your statement earlier, the elements of the shiny object are so alluring. It is difficult to turn away, because you're like the next thing could be the great breakthrough.
Well, we all crave, we're human beings and we crave those wins, right? And when a win takes years to accomplish, it's hard. And that's why I like this playbook approach, because you most of the time is really identifying like what is that one most important thing. And once you've decided that, everyone in the room is committed to it. And it's very clear across the organization. The one most important thing that we must achieve is, I'll make it up, 15% revenue growth, right? And then you establish what are the no less than 3, no more than 6 defining objectives that get you to that one most important goal, that one most important strategic objective of 15% revenue growth. And that could be things like we need a new ERP system so that we can track our sales better. One minor example, but these are qualitative. They're not quantitative measures. So it's like qualitatively, we need a new ERP. We might need to increase our talent in the sales leadership area. Things like that, right? But there's like 4 to 6. And then, and by the way, everyone in the executive team owns those goals and objectives, right? Everybody. It doesn't matter if you're the CFO, the CEO, the VP of sales, or the head of HR, you all own them unilaterally. And then below that, we establish what are called the strategic operating objectives. And these are quantitative and they're broken out by functional team. So finance will do these 4 to 6 things. Sales will do these 4 to 6 things. Marketing is responsible here, so on and so forth, right? HR puts in a recruiting plan, things of that nature. And it all fits on one page and it's time-based.
Yep.
So that, Q4 is coming, we're in the middle of September now. So for those that are on the fiscal calendar, Q4 is coming up, and you literally walk around with this playbook in your pocket. Every meeting you have is out on the table. And if you're talking about things that aren't on the playbook, you stop and you do a gut check. Are we talking about the right stuff? Mm-hmm. Or we need to adjust our strategy? But what it does, it allows the organization to be completely cohesive and transparent and accountable for achieving the things that are the most important things to work on. It's not saying that other things aren't important and that we'll do other things, or we're putting the bulk of our energy into what's on the playbook. And that had worked very well at LifeLearn. We implemented elements of this at Vets First Choice and Covetrus. And it's how I guide my clients today in a large way. And sure. It's kind of a revelation for a few folks. They're like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. And the fact that everyone in the executive team and below is clear and aligned on this creates these wild efficiencies that you maybe didn't discover before.
Yeah. Oh, I got to imagine it also galvanizes the team. Everybody feels, a part of something a little bit bigger because now everybody's moving in the same direction. So, it doesn't feel so bespoke or torn apart. I feel like oftentimes you see it more than I do, but oftentimes you probably walk into a situation and when you're going through that exercise to identify what's most important, everybody's got a different idea, and it generally doesn't align, and it really depends on where their bonuses are coming from. And
Yeah.
so once you get into a spot where those things are kind of all matched up, I mean it takes a lot of effort to get to that playbook.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And honestly, the hardest part is getting everyone aligned on what is that one most important objective, right? Because you nailed it. Everyone has a different perspective, and sometimes they're compensated to have a different perspective. So we've had situations in the past where it would take an entire day to come to a consensus on the one most important thing. But one of the defining objectives has been in the past realign compensation plans against the most important objectives.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Those in establishing those KPIs.
Because if you, like you said, if you start off with that most important thing on top, and then like you just mentioned, the whole executive team is aligned. Now they've got to go to their team and match those things up. I mean, that makes all the sense in the world, but common sense isn't very common, as they say.
Sometimes, I think people get emotional about it too, because they're working really hard against things that they believe are their truths. And change management's tough, but the one constant in business is change.
Yeah.
You have to keep adapting in order to evolve and to grow.
You have mentioned a couple of times, we keep talking about leadership. You keep talking about when you get an engagement and you're brought in, you're working generally with the executive team or one of the leaders within the industry, or within the company rather. When you come in, what sort of things are you actually looking for, listening for, measuring against in that leadership role, before you start, making adjustments on strategy? Because I got to imagine you're not just looking at the business. Oftentimes you've got to start with the people.
Well, yeah, the business is the people, right? Ultimately. And so I will often spend the first 20 to 25% of my time in any engagement observing everything and everybody. Right. So I'll go to the executive meetings as an observer, and I watch and I see the interactions. I see who's actually engaging and who's doing their email. Like, how these things happen, right? People aren't always engaged, and that's a sign of dysfunction, or lack of engagement, lack of motivation, lack of alignment. And so, for example, I had a client that the chief operating officer and the chief executive officer never met. They were never together outside of these big team meetings. So, and I went back to them. I said, look, are you two clear on each other's purpose, focus in this organization? And individually, they'd say, of course we are. The only time they ever met together is when they were with me, because I would bring them together. And I sort of had to sit them down and say, look, there's no daylight between the two of you around the company's purpose, mission, vision, how you're going to execute that. And if you're not, believe it or not, the rest of the team sees this, right? And so this company had a number of silos, operating silos, that were not collaborating, all doing really hard work, probably really high quality work, but they weren't working together. So you had a whole bunch of functional teams moving in different directions. And we had to basically put a stop to all of that, bring everyone together through this playbook method, right?
Yep.
But so to answer your question, I almost always focus on the people first. And it's not, and by the way, that's not always just the executive team. It's the middle leadership team as well, right?
Yeah, of course.
And making sure that that companies are thinking deeply about employee development. They're thinking deeply about succession planning. They're thinking deeply about, do they have the right people in the right seats on the bus? Those
Yep.
kinds of things.
Yep.
It's often difficult for really busy executives to just pause and meditate on that a little bit, and to really observe their teams in action and how they're working together or not. So that's almost entirely the first place I'll focus. We did an engagement one time. I did this with my partner group in Denver. We did we called it a business X-ray of this company that was relatively early stage, but had a growing customer base, had a growing strategic partnership base, was getting a lot of really nice PR on their work. But the CEO felt like something wasn't engaging, something wasn't igniting the way she expected it to. And so we did interviews with all the executives over a period of a couple of weeks, just one-on-ones. We tried to make it not like the Office Space movie where the Bobs came in and asked, tell me what you do all day. We weren't that way about it. We were asking more about like, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
What things get you excited in the morning? Where do you see opportunities? Where do you see gaps? And it was a really incredible exercise. It was time consuming, but really incredible exercise, because what we found was there were patterns both in motivations and gaps. Right. So we were able to bring that back together. And then we did a full financial analysis of the business. We did a channel strategy analysis. We did sort of, commercialization strategy and new product launch strategy analysis. And we brought it all together to say, here's where we think your gaps are. We did a 9-block grid on the executive team. So the CEO could sort of compare how she felt about her direct reports versus what this team of former executives would align some of these folks around, the 9-block grid, where you look at opportunity or execution and performance.
Yep.
Right. And so very clearly, and luckily for her, a lot of the folks are sort of like in the middle, which is kind of where you want a lot of your employees. But there were a few that were sort of in that top right corner where they're probably not being challenged enough, right? High performance, but really high potential. And so the question was, how can you stretch those individuals and support them in stretching them to achieve more? And that led to a number of organizational adjustments that were really helpful in terms of capturing more of the opportunity that was being left on the table.
Yeah. Going back to really your point is that the people are the business, and without, your people doing the work or, participating in the service or the product development or what have you, then you don't have anything to sell or bring to the market.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, the folks that are in leadership positions got there because they excelled at a thing, not necessarily at leading people, or inspiring confidence, or, creating motivation, or any of the things that you actually, are tasked with, that actually has nothing to do with the job itself per se, but that's how you got to that leadership position, which is, I guess, sort of ironic, right? Because you're being recognized for how good you are at a task, or but not necessarily, now you're told to, turn around and and teach it and replicate it and pull people, with you. But oftentimes that's not the case with folks that are there, especially in that middle section where you're talking about the mid-level, management, because they very clearly got there being really good at a part of their job. Mm-hmm. So how do you, work with the executive team to, see that and be relatively self-aware of themselves, and then for them to also be able to transition that to helping the leaders within their business do the same?
Yeah, I mean, that is that's a widespread challenge across every company I've ever been part of or collaborated with. And I think what you're talking about is subject matter experts that are really good at what they do, but probably more deep than they are broad, right? Yeah. And leading people is a whole another skill set that sometimes is hard to teach. A lot of people have natural leadership capability, and some just aren't as comfortable in those areas. But what I found, and I'm going back to my Patrick Lencioni models here, is there are 3 character traits that I've learned to look for in everyone I surround myself with. And it guides everything I do from hiring to development to sometimes transitioning people out of the organization. And it sounds overly simple, and I can't take credit for it. This is a Lencioni model, but it's hungry, humble, and smart, right? So I'll unwrap that a little bit. Hungry, and these are my words, not so much for personal gain, but for the mission, right? That sounds obvious, but when you get people that have been really successful and they've climbed up their career ladders, you're always going to run into people that are really focused on what's in it for me. And I'm not saying that that's not okay. I'm just saying that when you have people that are leading parts of the organization or organizations themselves that are really focused on what's in it for the company, what's in it for the customers, what's in it for, in the case of animal health, for the patients that we're trying to help, that's where you want people like that in your ecosystem. The other one, because by the way, personal gain will come, it'll follow.
Yeah.
When you achieve organizational gain. Humble, again, sounds obvious. You can hire really smart assholes, but they're still assholes, and no one works well in those environments. And I've made those mistakes in the past as well, where you hire people that are super smart. You think you really need their intellect, their subject matter expertise, but they become a cancer and a toxin in the organization, and it's 100% counterproductive. And you have to remove those. You have to get them out ASAP. Humility also breeds trust, which is the foundation of, any organization, whether that be a company, a family. You see it all the time in the military, right? If you don't trust the person next to you, the ultimate worst things could happen, right?
Yeah.
You have to have that as part of the foundation. And humility, having that vulnerability-based trust. I could say to you, Justin, I'm really struggling with this. I know you've got a lot of skill in this area. Could you help me out with this challenge I have, or this task, or approaching this market segment? That vulnerability-based trust breeds humility. It breeds collaboration. It breeds a better, more adept organization. And it also breeds, by the way, future leaders, because everyone under your organization sees the way that you interact with your counterparts, and then that becomes part of the culture.
Yep.
So that's hungry and humble. And then smart, again, sounds obvious. I'm not talking about technically smart. That's just part of playing ball. Like you have to have the experience. You have to have the resume. You have to have all those things in order to come into a role. I'm talking about people smart, which is often more challenging. So people that have that really high EQ, that understand that different people communicate in different ways, and being able to operate within teams in a more nimble, collaborative fashion, it's hard to teach. So I try to find people with that character trait: hungry, humble, and smart.
Yep.
I organize my interview process around those character traits. I organize our review process around those character traits. In times we've had to structure transition people out of the company because some of those have lacked. And by the way, it can't be 2 of 3. It has to be all 3, or it doesn't work.
Yeah. But right, like you said, you can still hire smart assholes, right? So, or really humble idiots. I mean, so you have
you love them, but you still have to know what they're doing.
Exactly. So, thinking about today's market, I mean, we're talking, like, as you mentioned, middle of September 2023, we're going into the fourth quarter. The economy's been all over the place. what type of leader are you looking for, today? I mean, I've had Mark Sponseller on here a couple of months ago, and we were talking about, peacetime leadership versus wartime leadership, and, the qualities, that you have in each of those types of people. You're talking about similar traits. You have it set up a little bit differently. He's more on a merger acquisition side. You're more about developing companies for their next stage. So what type of leader is important today? And I guess these types of leaders are important all the time, but specifically, what's changed over the last 18 to 24 months for you in terms of qualities that are running more successful companies during uncertain times versus a really an economy that's great.
And that's it's such a good question, and I've been reflecting on this a bit over the past few months because things have changed a lot. We've got chaos in parts of the world. We have decade-long record inflation rates, borderline recessionary times. People are nervous right now. We've got, financial organizations imploding. And I think, how would I think about leadership in times like this? I think the word I'm looking for is brave but focused. Right. In recessionary times, I would argue, that's the time to actually be investing in your organization, not the time to be holding back.
Mm-hmm.
You have to feed the economy, and people are nervous. So having that courage to stick to your strategy, to stay the course, to empower your people to do their best. One thing that, I was asked one time, as a former CEO, what was kind of the main thing that I felt helped me be successful? And I said, man, it's not really about me. It's about finding the best people I can find, sometimes whether I could afford them or not, and getting the hell out of their way. You got to be a bulldozing of obstacles, I guess is what I would say. So the most successful leaders, whether it's in times like today or times in, where we have more stability in the markets, I think the same character traits hold true: hungry, humble, smart, brave, focused, and having a bias for action. So critical. How many meetings have you been in where there's a whole bunch of talk, and at the end of the meeting, you're wondering what was decided?
Yeah.
Let's just stop doing that. That would be a huge improvement for most organizations. Having that bias for action, but that action being tied to your strategy and that playbook, that to me is the key to success. And I think it's more important in times like today, but I would say it's always important.
Yeah. Man, if we could get those meetings just eliminated, my margins on our retainers would skyrocket.
Yeah, it's a real issue, actually. And it's not, I don't think it's really intentional, by the way. It's just, we as a corporate culture are addicted to meetings. And by the way, meetings are really important. It's where decisions should be made. It's where alignment should be gained. But oftentimes I find myself sitting in a meeting. I'm wondering, what are the intended outcomes here? And then at the end of the meeting, you're always wondering, well, what were the decisions that were made? And by the way, who's responsible for the actions that need to be taken? And when's the next update? When are we going to come back with, results on those actions? And by the way, how do we measure success?
Yeah.
What does that look like? So those feel like really basic principles, but, again, I would implement things in organizations that I worked at where I don't necessarily feel like a formal agenda may be necessary, but what are the core topics and what are the hopeful outcomes before any meeting is set? And by the way, are all the right people at that meeting? And are there people at the meeting that don't need to be there? I used to decline meetings. It would drive people crazy if I would decline them because it wasn't clear what value I could bring and I had other stuff to do. But what happened was people started coming back with, here are the thematic objectives of this meeting. It's going to be 45 minutes in length, and when we're done, we're going to achieve these three things.
Or have direction for them. Yeah. I mean, so we implemented that. I mean, it sounds simple, but we implemented that just 18 months ago where, we sent out an agenda for every single meeting. It's generally, thematic based. And then at the end, what are the action items and who's responsible for them and when are they due? Because we were, as a marketing agency, I mean, we focus a lot on business development. So oftentimes everything comes with some sort of timeline, right? Because we are a little bit different in that we also work with sales, so we're, you try to, pin campaigns against events or, whatever's going on. And, it does sound so simple, but man, it made a huge difference in just how quickly meetings got completed, because now there are set agendas and there are action items, and then you're checking them the next week or the next month when you're meeting again. All right, Dave, did you finish this? Susan, did you get this completed? And we're a small organization. We don't have hundreds of people. So we work with clients that do, and so again, who should we have there? There are definitely meetings where I will send a note to the CEO or the leader and say, don't need you today. We need your social media person. We need, your head of sales or whatever. So, take your time back.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, if you need 12 minutes of time, schedule 12 minutes.
Right.
Outlook often defaults to an hour, and that time is it's just a big vacuum of nothingness.
Mine, I actually made our team calendar, our admin. I made her change it to 15-minute defaults, so that we didn't have so we don't have that. So you have to physically change it to be longer, and it just inherently, it makes you, or subconsciously rather, it makes you think, okay, do I really need longer than 15 minutes for this?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's, it's amazing what you can accomplish in 15 minutes if you're very clear on what your objectives are when you walk into a situation.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, heck, even this, you and I talking today, the idea is, sure, some friends getting together to talk about a topic that's important, but at the end of the day, the theme is about leadership and, quantifying, what makes a good leader and how, what should an organization look for? How do they engage you? Right. So that was the whole impetus for this call for Inspectations. But, the reason for that is because we are looking to, selfishly, take your expertise and turn it into an article, turn it into something for LinkedIn, give you authority on the space because you have done this, you are doing this, you're paid handsomely, to advise on these topics. And, TAG works with groups just like yours and just like your clients to help them do better at these things. And so, even something so simple as just a podcast, we still set an agenda. The expectation is this is what we're going to get out of it. And, try to, bring that through on a large scale too. So, I mean, your advisement opportunities and the way in which you work with customers, I mean, the great thing that they're going to expect out of stuff is that there will be actionable items that come out of it. There will be, changes in the business. There will be, improvements in the culture, because that is what you do, right? And I think that's something that's so interesting is being able to set those clear parameters. And at the end, no, you might not be able to say from day one, working with Rockwood Advisement Group is going to get you this return on investment, but this is our track record for turning organizations just like yours around. And I think that is what's so neat and valuable.
And it's fun too. I mean, a lot of times it's really fun to see organizations evolve, sometimes in very small ways, that have really big outcomes, and there's a reason to celebrate that. You can see the you can see the employees that you're working with, these companies have a different perspective around why they get up every day. And that to me is like, I mean, that's a form of compensation in itself. Just, and I continue, by the way, to stay in touch with a lot of the people I've worked with, former clients, and watch them continue to evolve in their roles. And it's incredibly rewarding to know that you played a small part in helping not only the company, but sometimes those individuals really just evolve and change the way that they approach their strategies, their day-to-day, how they develop and mentor their teams. We've had a number of employees that have gone through this process that we've employed and have ended up in roles with greater responsibilities. And they probably were always ready for that challenge, but until going through the process, maybe weren't recognized as having those capabilities. So it's great to see that kind of growth at the micro level and the macro level.
So what's next for you and Rockwood?
Whatever my wife says. I don't know.
We know who the boss is then.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot, and there's an opportunity to scale here. We've gotten a number of requests from everything from again, early stage companies. We started doing some growth capital work as an example, and we have companies that are at seed stage all the way through Series B that are trying to raise capital, and we're fortunate to have some great partnerships with some really incredible PE firms and other institutional investors. So we're thinking of scaling that part of the business a little bit, particularly as we come through, this economic time that we're living in right now. Sure. We have had some engagement, some large multi-billion-dollar multinational organizations in animal health that we're excited about leading into a little bit. So those are some opportunities. But ultimately, I think, taking my own advice that I give to my clients is, we're going to stay the course. Our mission is to help companies scale, to help them achieve their full potential. And we're having a lot of fun doing it. So I think the next step for us is to keep hammering at it and, continue to build that portfolio of companies that are coming out of the process more successful, and hopefully also in that process helping develop more leaders that are going to go on to create more leaders that will go on to create more leaders. I think that's really the thing that we get the most out of in terms of our own personal satisfaction, is that leadership development component of what we do.
Sure. Well, I know we talked about sometimes being hard to find on a personal level, but how can folks that want to engage with Rockwood Advisement Group find you?
Probably the easiest place is LinkedIn. We don't have a website. Everything we've done is through network referral. But right on LinkedIn, if you find me, you will find Rockwood Advisement Group. All the contact information is there. That's the easiest way right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jaime, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you don't need the slickers over the weekend for the hurricane.
We might just hunker down and see what happens, but I think you're right. I think it's going to miss us.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Well, man, it's been great catching up. It's been great hearing your thoughts on leadership, your expertise and how you help companies. I think that's really enlightening and obviously, some great nuggets, for people to use themselves.
Well, it was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you, and I hope it was helpful. I feel like there's probably 30 hours of conversation we could have on these topics, and probably never get to the bottom of it all. But I had a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Good deal. Yes, we'll have to do this again, dive deeper into it. On behalf of Jaime Carroll, principal of the Rockwood Advisement Group, you've been listening to the latest episode of the Inspectations podcast, powered by the Ably Group.
You have been listening to the Inspectations podcast. On behalf of your host, Justin Starbird, and our guests today, thank you for listening. To learn more about the Inspectations podcast, our guest, or the Ably Group, please visit us at www.ablygroup.com. be sure to keep inspecting what you are expecting.